there aren't innocent people. There are innocent people. But at what point in time do the Palestinian people, right, if they want to claim to be innocent civilians, at what point do they have a responsibility to restore or kind of get rid of the status quo? Because don't people in all societies have a responsibility to challenge or overthrow governments if their governments are not?
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Truth Review. I'm Hayes. And this exchange between Dave Smith and Laura Loomer has one specific claim that needs to be checked before we get into the broader argument. Loomer cited a poll claiming 58% of Palestinians would elect Ismail Haniyeh as the leader of Hamas if given the chance today. There's a problem with that claim. Haniyeh was killed in an airstrike in Tehran back in July of 2024. Whatever poll she's referencing is citing a man who has been dead for roughly 2 years, and that needs to be established before evaluating anything else said in this exchange. Hit subscribe, because Truth Review checks the receipts before the segment moves on. Now, let's get into it.
Open air prison, okay? These are people who elected an Islamic terrorist organization to represent them. There are active polling measures taking place this week by Palestinian media, these are Muslim organizations that are conducting polls that show that over 58% of the Palestinian population would elect Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of Hamas, even after watching all the havoc that Hamas has brought, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't innocent people. There are innocent people. But at what point in time do the Palestinian people, right, if they want to claim to be innocent civilians, at what point do they have a responsibility to restore or kind of get rid of the status quo? Because don't people in all societies have a responsibility to challenge or overthrow governments if their governments are not serving the people?
That is such a great question. So let me just say this, okay? The United States of America in the last 20 years, okay, between the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, which I think we can all probably agree were like just ridiculous catastrophes that we never should have fought. Let's also add in there the war, Obama's, which I'm sure you'll agree with me about, Obama overthrowing Gaddafi in Libya and leading to the migrant crisis into Europe was an absolute disaster. Let's also throw in there the attempt,
and bringing in all the refugees to attack Americans.
Hold on, let me just finish my point. Let's also add in there the attempted regime change war in Syria, which we started, that led to 500,000 people dying. Let's also throw in there the war in Yemen, which we backed the Saudis fighting.
Don't forget the Arab Spring.
Something else like 500,000 somewhere in that ballpark also died. When you add up all of the numbers, you're talking about millions and millions of dead innocent people. What responsibility do you have? What responsibility do I have? What responsibility do you have? Are we fair targets now to be murdered because we haven't overthrown the status quo, as you just said? Why is it that we as Americans get to hold these standards against other nations, which we would never dream of imposing on ourselves? The question is always asked, what's Israel supposed to do? Don't they have a right to defend themselves? Do all of these countries that we've slaughtered innocent people in, do they have a right to defend themselves? Do they have a right to come over here and kill innocent civilians? I would say no. They don't have a right to come kill innocent civilians. You have political grievances with the government class, but it does not follow, as Osama bin Laden or Bill Clinton or Barack Obama or George W. Bush would argue, that it then follows that we can inflict this collective punishment against people. If we're going to be the better ones, if we're going to say you're the Islamists, but we're the civilized people, if we're going to represent the best tradition of Western civilization, then the point would be that we don't believe in any of that. We don't believe that you can target innocent men, women, and children.
Let's separate what actually happened here into two parts, because there's a factual error and then there's a substantive argument, and they need to be evaluated independently. Start with the factual problem because it's straightforward and verifiable. Loomer stated that current polling shows 58% of Palestinians would elect Ismail Haniyeh as Hamas leader today. Haniyeh was assassinated in Tehran in July of 2024, a fact confirmed across international media coverage at the time and not in dispute. Whatever poll she's citing, assuming it exists in the specific form she described, cannot logically be measuring current support for a leadership position held by a man who has been dead for roughly 2 years. That's not a matter of interpretation. It's a basic chronological problem with the claim as presented, and it should have been challenged in the moment rather than allowed to pass unchecked into the rest of the segment. Now to the substantive argument, which stands entirely separate from that specific error and deserves to be evaluated on its own terms. Dave Smith's core point was about consistency and how collective responsibility for a government's actions gets applied. He raised a series of documented American-led or American-backed conflicts: the Iraq War, the war in Afghanistan, the NATO intervention in Libya under the Obama administration, the attempted regime change effort in Syria, and the Saudi-led military campaign in Yemen that received American backing. His argument was that American voters elected the governments responsible for each of these conflicts, and that independent estimates placed the death toll from the Syrian civil war and the Yemen war at approximately 500,000 people each, with Iraq and Afghanistan casualty figures adding substantially more when combined with those numbers. The logical structure of that argument is what actually carries weight here, more than any single statistic attached to it. If the operating standard is that a population's electoral choices make its civilians legitimate targets for collective retaliatory violence, that standard cannot logically stop at one specific border. Applied consistently, it would extend equally to American civilians whose elected governments launched wars resulting in documented mass civilian casualties across multiple countries. Smith explicitly rejected that standard altogether rather than trying to selectively apply it in one direction, arguing that no civilian population, whether Palestinian or American, should be treated as a fair target for violence based on the actions of the government their electoral system happened to produce. That distinction is what separates a principle that holds up under consistent application from a talking point that only functions when pointed in a single direction. Smith's underlying argument about collective punishment and civilian casualties stands on its own merit regardless of the Haniyeh timeline error, and it doesn't require that specific statistic to be effective. But the claim Loomer opened with does not survive basic scrutiny, and that distinction matters enough to be stated plainly rather than left to blend into the rest of the exchange. Subscribe to Truth Review. We check the timeline before we evaluate the argument, and we separate what's factually broken from what actually holds up under consistent logic.